Good morning. Thank you everybody for taking the time to join us this morning. We've got an enormous number of registrations. It's quite impressive and quite humbling actually, the number of people who are wanting to join in and signing for this topic this morning. My name is Dele Adesina. I'm managing partner for Carrick Wealth here in Nigeria. I'm joined today by two panelists, Richard Morgan and Linda Potikari, who are representatives of Morgan Oxford Education Consultancy, who have presence here in Nigeria and also in the UK. So I'm sure in true Nigerian style, we're going to have a few late joiners and a few late arrivals, but thank you very much for being with us here this morning. And we look forward to providing you with an engaging discussion and making sure that we can address as many questions as we can possibly do so in this period of time. So just a little bit of further additional background. This is the first in our series of educational focused seminars that we intend to provide to our Nigerian audience. Today we're focused on tertiary education. That includes universities abroad, for example, as well as the foundation stages that precede that. So a little bit of an introduction to myself, a little bit of introduction to Carrick, and then I'll hand over to our specialists who can give incredible detail concerning taking education abroad and the opportunities and concerns and things that questions that have been asked and been raised already in advance. So by way of background, as I've mentioned, my name is Dele Adesina. I've been a private wealth manager for the best part of 20 years. When I finished my education abroad, when I finished at London School of Economics, I began my graduate training with Coutts & Co., which is the King and Queen of England's private bank, effectively. I've been a private banker or wealth manager throughout that time. So having been with Coutts, I spent some time with the Royal Bank of Canada, and for about 11 years or so, I therefore was dealing with high net worth, affluent and emerging European resident clients. In 2015, however, I joined Standard Chartered's private banking business in London on the private wealth team for the Africa clients. So I was focused on West Africa, to Ghana to some extent, but especially Nigeria. And ever since 2015, that has been my dedication and my focus has been helping Nigerian families, Nigerian individuals, Nigerian clients meet and exceed their financial objectives, understand my clients' objectives, their plans for themselves, for their children, for their families, for their loved ones, and ensure that they're in a position to meet and exceed those. So, as mentioned, I'm managing partner for Carrick Wealth here in Nigeria. Carrick is a financial advisory firm. It's the fastest growing financial advisory firm for in Africa as it stands. We've received several awards for our best advisory services in this region. We have offices not only here now in Nigeria, but across South Africa, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, and presence also in Mauritius, for example. So I think that's displayed here in front of you. So we've received a lot of questions in advance of the seminar. Several people have raised topics that we'd like to discuss and things they'd like to begin to understand today. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first in a series of education-driven seminars and webinars that we'll do. Some will be in person, some will be online, as we're doing today. But I can probably summarize the three principal questions that we're being asked to attempt to address in the course of today's topic as being the following. One is certainly, how do I prepare my child adequately to go and successfully get a place abroad, to potentially get a scholarship, to be able to go and study abroad, essentially. How do I adequately prepare my child and my children in order for that to be a reality? The second one is, how do I make a decision? How do we ensure that we are getting the right country, the right course, the right environment? My child may have particular needs, whether those are educational, whether those are social, but how do we make informed and accurate decisions that are going to be of benefit to my child in the long run? And the third question, which pertains to what I do and where my experience in particular comes in, is how do I ensure I can fund the cost of overseas education? What is it going to cost me? And can I be sure that we're in a position to do it? So that we're not having to say, well, look, in reality, we're only going to be able to send one of my 3 children to school. So how can we fund it? And is it going to be, have we got the appropriate plans in place that we've stress tested and reviewed to ensure that this is going to be a success? And you can see on the screen now, just a quick look at some of the headwinds that we're facing here in Nigeria. So over the last 4 years, Nigeria has faced, this is to the end of last year actually, if I update the numbers to today, the sad story continues, but to the end of last year, over a 4-year period, there was a 233% decline in the value of Naira. If you look at 10 years, that's even worse. There's 600% decline. So there's a 6-fold decline in your real purchasing power when you're earning in Naira and you've held Naira assets over the past 10 years. And if you said, well, look, what are the long-term trends? What are the long-term implications? I relocated myself and my family to Nigeria. I'm enormously optimistic about our country. I think it's full of opportunity. I simply encourage and implore people to protect their downside risk. If we look at 20 years, so you're not saying I'm being too short-termist or too alarmist, there's a 700% decline in your real purchasing power versus dollar, right? It's stark and it's concerning. So having said that, and the purpose of today in particular is to give some focus to those first 2 questions that I mentioned, which are, how do I successfully prepare my child to be able to take the advantage of going to university abroad or tertiary education abroad? That being, what qualifications will they need? What other criteria do I need to be mindful of? All in all, what's going to be required for me to send my child abroad? In addition, how do we make a decision about which course, which institution, which country even do we send our child or our children to? So with that in mind, Carrick are very, very proud to work with specialists, education consultants such as Morgan Oxford, Richard, who's the CEO, Linda, who's a consultant and has lived and worked in Nigeria. She's been head of British International School here in Lagos. Also Dele Waterman College, both very, very prestigious institutions here in Nigeria. So there's genuine first-hand, deep understanding of our culture, our children, and what therefore may be suitable for them. So without further ado, I'd love to hand over to them and let them take away from here.
Okay, thank you, Dele, for those introductory words. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Morgan Oxford, but also I'm going to allow Linda to introduce herself during this slide. But let me first begin to tell you about myself. I started life as a UK lawyer. I did a law degree at the University of Nottingham and qualified as a UK solicitor. Practiced for 15 years in Oxford in private practice, and if I'm honest, didn't enjoy it at all. Lots of reasons for that, but I wasn't really cut out for it. So there was a point in life where I changed careers, and various reasons we won't go into now, opened a education consultancy which started in Abuja. For the last 15 years, we've been working firstly in Abuja and latterly in Lagos, dealing with an age range from 16 up to, well, actually some people into their 50s going to do master's programs and PhDs. In that time, we've specialized in all sorts of areas. We've sent children to do medicine in Eastern Europe. We've sent people to very prestigious schools in the UK, USA, and Canada. So we really do have a very thorough breadth and knowledge of the market. I started in the universities market, and I guess as time has gone on, I've dealt with younger and younger students, and my own speciality tends to now be the 16 to 18-year-old bracket. We have another side to our practice which deals with master's students also. We have a great experience in that. We pride ourselves in giving a very personalised service. I mean, that's really very, very important. I mean, Dele's touched on the issues of the Nigerian economy. I mean, I've witnessed that myself over the time that I've been here, and our aim is to deal with people on a one-on-one basis. Our aim is to put the student into the environment which best suits them and which is going to get the best out of them, but which also suits your pocket as well. And so, I mean, that's really what we're trying to achieve. Now, what I'm going to do, as I say, before I go on and talk about one or two other things, is introduce Linda, who is working with us, and just give her the opportunity to tell you about her background and introduce herself to you. So over to you, Linda, for a second.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be very short and sweet about this. I've been around the world a bit and been in education now for 42 years. 19 years of that has been in school leadership and also working at local authority level in the UK, overseeing, upwards of 15 to 105 schools across a local authority. My experience isn't just in the UK though. I've also worked in Egypt, Sudan, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Kenya and Nigeria. So I've got a broad range of experience, worked in boarding schools and non-boarding schools, and obviously two key schools in Nigeria, which are Day Waterman and British International School. Richard.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry, it's just take you back to that slide. Yeah, wait a minute. I'm going to get to the right one. Yeah, so let's begin by telling you the countries that we cover. And I'm just going to touch on the differences between these countries. I mean, we really are a global firm. I mean, I didn't mention, and that Linda has, that we ourselves have a new office just opened in Mumbai in India. We're in Cairo in Egypt. We've got a big presence in London. So from the UK, we're advising students from all over the world. If you look at this slide, you'll see 6 different countries. And I'm just going to highlight what I mean. I mean, there's something that's right for everybody. Hungary is a very strong country for medicine. There are only 4 medical universities in the entire country. We work with all 4. They all teach in English language, which is very, very important. They're all, I wouldn't say they're easy to get into, but they're easier than British, American and Canadian universities in the sense that academic criteria is slightly less challenging and they're considerably cheaper. You wouldn't say they're cheap, they're still expensive, I would say, by African standards, in the sense that Hungary, for example, to study 1 year of medicine is going to be in the region of 18 or 19,000 euros. So it's certainly not cheap, but it's considerably cheaper than the USA and the UK and Canada, which will be potentially 4 times more than that. Germany, if you're going to do an engineering qualification, I mean, Germany is world famous for engineering. I mean, you only have to look at the car industry to see that they are leaders in that, and that reflects in the standard of their engineering universities. Ireland, not many people necessarily know this, it's an IT hub. It's famous for IT, and it's growing increasingly famous for IT, based on become the European Centre for IT. Canada, if you're looking for permanent residence for yourself, probably currently the #1 destination. I mean, this changes from time to time, and 1 year it can be one country and another country another, but at the moment Canada is very strong. It's one of the few countries where dependents can travel with students. I mean, the UK, you could do this until relatively recently, but they've just taken away that ability. USA, very, very strong for scholarships. If you're talented at sports, or if you're talented in a particular area, USA has great scholarship opportunities, and we know about most of them. And then there's my favourite, because I'm sat in Oxford in the UK at the moment, famous for its education and its university. UK has, I would say, the easiest visa, generally, as long as you tick the boxes and you get it right. I mean, we ourselves have almost 100% success rate when we place our students through UK universities. It's quick. If you want to go to Canada as a student, you possibly have got a 6-month lead time to get a visa. UK, you can do it in, well, in 24 hours, actually, if you have your paperwork right and you follow the right. The point is that there's something for everybody. And our job, we feel as consultants, is to make sure that we put you in the right box and we send you to the right destination to study the right course and hopefully get the best results for you. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, most frequently asked, I've done it again. Most frequently asked questions by parents. Now, the purpose of the next two slides is just to show you the different angle from which parents and students tackle things. Now here, I mean, we're looking perhaps more at the 16 to 18 group. When you get over 18, you're an adult, and so maybe some of these questions wouldn't be raised. So questions we get thrown at all the time by parents. Parents are always concerned about the academic ranking of the university. Is it important? Well, yes, I guess it is. If you study at Oxford University, it's going to set you up, hopefully, for potentially a very good career, but it won't be very helpful if you want to do something in AI or in digital marketing or in gaming, because that's not really what Oxford University is all about. If you want to do a degree in philosophy or religious studies or Egyptology, it's a great place to go. Don't get me wrong, but my point is, yes, the academic ranking is important, and traditionally to Nigerian Nigerian parents, it's very, very important. But I just would say that look at the bigger picture. I mean, the other thing to say is that academic rankings are often linked to research and research grants. I mean, a university that's got a big research grant, which would be one of the Russell Group universities in the UK, isn't necessarily the best university for teaching. What is the added value ranking of the school or university? Well, again, we see this question asked often. I mean, children, parents, students want to go to the institutions that have the best exam results. But does that mean that it's going to get the best out of them? Or it's going to be, yeah, I mean, those kind of questions are very, very important. And again, what we try and do is we take the person, we look at them as an individual, we work out what they want to study, we look at their academic ability, and then we try to advise them as to what we feel is best for them. If we're dealing with the 16 to 18 age group, pastoral care is very, very important. I mean, often we're looking at people who are going out of the country for the first time. Even if they're not, 16 to 18, many parents will want their children to go straight into a university environment. Is that the right environment for them at that age? It's going to depend a little bit on the particular student that we're talking about. It might depend on their sex, their maturity. There are lots and lots of factors to consider. Would they be better in a environment which is more controlled? Quite possibly they would. Or should they be given a bit more responsibility, and if you like, put in an environment which prepares them better for university? So a pathway college, and again, we work with many pathway colleges, and often that's a good route, because it's a bridging gap from maybe a traditional boarding school to a university environment. So rather than going straight from school straight into university, they have a middle stepping stone which helps them prepare for that. Which universities do students go to study at? Well, I mean, every conceivable university, and for some people, of course, university isn't necessarily the right choice. That comes back again to us hopefully putting the right person in the right box. What's right for student A is going to be right for student B. And again, what are the weaknesses and strengths of the schools and universities? Some are very academic, some are geographically in cities, some are in the country. If you're going to do an agricultural degree, better maybe to be in an area of great farming prowess rather than in the city of London. It's a difficult question to answer, but we have to look at the specifics of specific institutions and tie them into the children. What we do have is a massive range of contacts and connections. We work with institutions all over the world, and we're connecting with them all the time. I mean, that part of what I do is to travel to conferences where we're meeting new institutions all the time, and we're always looking for ones that best fit the people that we work with. So if we then turn this around the other way and look at the students' questions, you'll see that sometimes they're a bit different. Mum and Dad are concerned about the universities and the academic standards. The students, again, particularly perhaps the younger ones, have got more pressing needs on their mind. I mean, policies with regard to personal phones and laptops, I mean, are they being treated like adults, or are they still children? Some people respond better to one than the other. It's a personal thing, and the parents have to have an ultimate say in that with regard to their specific child. A big question for Nigerians travelling abroad is often, this may seem very silly, but it's of course very important. Do they serve Nigerian food in the canteen? How accessible actually is Nigerian food? If you go to London, it can be very accessible. If you go to, I don't know, Dundee, it's probably still quite accessible now. I suspect there's quite a lot of Nigerian students in Dundee, but 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been. I mean, things like that can make a difference. What I would say is that Linda and I, between us, have probably lived in Nigeria for 30 years between us. We can tell you how old we are. That would be giving our secrets away. But I mean, Linda's been in Nigeria, I'm guessing, for 10 years. I mean, I've been there on and off for 20 years. And when I say we're there, we really are there. I mean, I stay in Victoria Island. We've got an office in VI, and we've got a staff of over 20 people there right now. I actually am in Oxford, if I'm telling you the truth right now, but I'll be there next weekend. So we are on the ground, and we do understand, I think, how you guys work better than most consultants do, who are coming from other countries and perhaps not as au fait with what's going on. What are the best medical pathways to the USA? This, I can't answer this in very short time, but what I can tell you is that if you wanted to go the traditional route, you have to do a first degree before you do a second degree, and medicine, you have to go and do any degree. Actually, you can do a philosophy degree or a politics degree, although generally people would choose to do biology or a human science related degree before they then go on and do medicine. The path is a tortuous one. It's a very expensive one. It takes a very long time, and unless there is an awful lot of money, it's a difficult path to follow. We've got some fantastic alternatives which will take you to the USA, which are more direct, quicker, and cheaper. I'm not to say that the second one will suit everyone, but we've got them in our armory, and medicine's a particularly complicated area that I really enjoy because it is so complicated, and we like to problem solve. I mean, that's one of our strengths, I hope. But certainly there's lots and lots of different options for medicine. They can involve foundation pathways through Ireland. They can involve going to places like Hungary. Historically, there are some very cheap options in Eastern Europe, and there are some you could actually study to be a doctor and become a doctor in 6 years, and it can be as expensive for 1 year in the UK as it is for 6 years in another country, to give you an idea of the difference. Which universities have an expertise in film and media? Well, again, I mean, the UK is fantastic for film and media. There are some wonderful universities there. Also, too, in the US, we work with a fantastic institution in Florida, which is in the same compound as Disney World, and it's got just wonderful, wonderful facilities. Where can I do a degree in computer game designing? I mean, I'm not going to give you the answer to that. You'll have to come and see me to know that. But there are lots and lots of places, but they won't be in Russell Group universities generally, and they won't be in the traditionally top universities in the States and in Canada. They'll be in some of the newer universities. And if that's what you want to do, that's perhaps where you should be going, because you'll get better training there than you will in the more traditional universities. I can now change slides again. Okay, I'm going to run through this very quickly. These are the kind of things that we get involved in. I mean, subject counselling, what we mean by that is sitting down with people and just talking to them about what they really want to study. I mean, people will come to us thinking that they're going to go down one particular pathway, and then by the time we've spoken to them, they'll be going down a different route. We've got, this isn't my expertise, if I'm honest, but we have people within our organisation, either within the organisation or people to whom we can refer people who are experts in this. They often come from a teaching background, and life is short. It's important that you make the right choices. As somebody who's looking back more in life than looking forward, I can say I've made mostly correct choices, but one or two howlers along the way, and perhaps if I'd had better advice, I would have chosen one or two things differently. We try to make sure that when you're making the decisions for the subjects, you make the right one. Pathway counselling is really important. At 16 in Nigeria, you finish your WIAC exams. You, from that point onwards, can go so many different routes. You can go down a 2-year study route, you can go down a 1-year study route, you can go into Nigerian university, of course, or you can go direct into some universities abroad. There are pros and cons of each of them. There are financial consequences of each of them. We understand all of that, and we can help you and advise you. Application support, again, if you're putting an application in, you want to get an offer from whoever it is you're applying to. We are exceptionally knowledgeable of the institutions that we're working with, and obviously we have direct contact with them on a regular basis. So we are hopefully in a good position to make sure that your application is correct and good, and it has the most likely chance of getting an acceptance. Offer negotiation, while it's not unknown for me certainly to speak directly to international admissions officers from schools and universities, and to tell them about particular circumstances of a student and give them specific reasons why perhaps they should consider them and give them an offer. Again, that's the kind of thing that we will certainly do. Health clearance, well, again, we are, in order to get into certain countries, there are certain health requirements and certain hospital examinations that have to be done or tests passed. Again, we help deal with that. Visa application support is very important, very, very important. Visas differ from country to country, and also they change throughout the year. There's been big changes in Canada this year and also in the UK. Fees and scholarships, again, we have great knowledge of. Scholarships is a huge area. We have pretty good knowledge. I have to say it's an area I'd like to improve upon, and I know it's an area that is of great interest to many Nigerian parents. We help with accommodation. It's really important that you get the accommodation right, and we have a travel and pickup service, which again we offer depending on it, if people require it. And in country, for children, particularly under 18, we get involved in guardianship to make sure that the legal requirements are met and that children are properly looked after and catered for. I'd also go as far to say we do continue contacting and talking to our students after they've travelled. I mean, that's really important for many reasons, and that's something which we regard as very important.
Thanks, Richard. The one really big thing when you're working either between your family members or with a company like Morgan Oxford, and there are a whole range of companies who do this, is that the realization that education is an investment. It's probably one of the biggest investments that any parent's going to make in terms of their family and their future lives. And all investments need planning. And one of the things that this investment into education brings people is the need for a kind of stability, whether it's financial or social, a security, i.e. being able to place the family in a long-term, secure and safe environment where grandchildren can be brought into and great-grandchildren can be brought into. And the needs of that is that supportive environment educationally. It is a strong curriculum inside the institution that's being chosen. It's about the ethics and the culture of those institutions, because every institution has different things. It's about understanding whether or not the environment is an enabling for your child. And that enablement actually is about making sure they are happy and that they feel safe and that they feel confident. You've also then got to think about, well, if I'm going to invest in one particular institution, are they going to place my child into a networking environment? Are they going to help them be exposed to new experiences and new opportunities? And these are important because when you move through life, particularly within an international environment, you're going to be have many, many challenges. Not just the food that you're eating, but also the views of people, the laws around you will be different. The ethics and the morals of each individual society is completely different. And all of that comes through education, not the sitting in the classroom listening to somebody lecture. It's sitting with other people and going out socially with those other people and seeing what is happening in a different environment. Overall, that planning, that investment is to produce an internationally minded, a creative, a confident adult in your child who not only is a member of any community in which they can move into, but they have the leadership skills and a sense of purpose from an intrinsic drive within them. Who are they as an adult? Can you, when you're working with them when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, plan ahead in order to produce that adult that you want them to be? And if they are happy, they are successful. And with that success comes the confidence. And that's absolutely key. Which comes first? Is it the career? Is it the course that you put them on and the university, or is it the country? There is no answer to this because every single discussion is completely different. And every single discussion is not a small discussion. It can take years. And that investment planning, part of it is financial. So when do you start saving? When do you start to secure that financial plan in which to help them through their university or their schools? Part of that planning is actually about the education process itself. So if you're looking at going into university, the absolute minimum time is 1 year ahead of making the university application. And then you've got to go backwards again to 3 years ahead for choosing the A levels or the IB course, the post-16 study before they go to university. You need to think about it 3 years ahead because you have to select out where they're going to be, what subjects they're going to take, and how those subjects will feed into their A-level choices or their IB choices or their university choice if they're very confident on where they want to go. And then depending on the curriculum, particularly if it's a British curriculum, you've got to look at it 5 years ahead, because at about the age of 13, 14, students have to select out of 14, 15 subjects, 8 of them that they're going to now study up to IGCSE or GCSE. So there's a lot of thinking to be, gone through before these choices can be made. On top of that, you have to think about, well, which course is it? And a parent might turn around and say, medicine. They're going to go into medicine. But the child is thinking, no, not really. That's not what I want to do. So there's a big discussion there, and the actual choice or the thinking behind careers will come into whether or not you need to have that very solid, broad foundation of subjects, or whether you can narrow it down to 3 pure sciences, maths and applied maths, whether you want to go into the arts focus. And all of that starts much earlier than what you think it should. Whose choice again? Oops, I've just done a Richard. Let me go back again. Whose choice? And this is a big one, because you do have to think about, are you putting a child, and I've had this with many, many parents, it doesn't matter which country they're in, they have in their head an aspiration which is theirs, not their child's, but theirs. So they think that this is the best way to go through in life, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become a professional. However, the world now is not the same as the world certainly when I was at school in the 70s. It's a very, very different world. So the aspirations, whilst they're good, there are other ways in which you can build a life and be successful and have influence over the environment around you. Most students now are very much into the digital world, and they can see that the digital world actually has more financial opportunity, it's more creative, it's more of a teamwork focus, and so they want to do that. If you think about engineering is a huge career pathway, and there's a lot of status in being an engineer. However, think about a Fiat Panda and a Maserati. Both of them have engineering inside them. Both of them need engineers. But the difference between a Fiat Panda and a Maserati is that a Maserati is considered beautiful. And the engineering doesn't necessarily produce that. It's the art and the design. So it could be that your child is thinking along the idea of, I want to help design a new world of cars, a new world of machinery. You can come into the medical fields in exactly the same way. You can have prosthetics for legs, prosthetics for eyes. If you take the original wooden leg, traditional kind of stump that you would put on your leg to help you walk, it's very different to the Paralympic engineered and quite attractive looking with all the colors and the springs in terms of runners in the Olympics. Again, the difference is not just that they're engineered, but there is an art and design in them, and that's very, very powerful. So the world is changing, the wants are changing, and so therefore the choices are going to be changing, and there's a discussion between parent and child, and that's very, very important. Over my many, many years in education, about 25% of students who go into a university course which has been highly influenced by the parent, about 25% of them drop out. They change course because it wasn't actually who they were. It wasn't where they wanted to be. So they normally start with 1 year, and then after 1 year, they take a step aside, they transfer courses, and they become who they are. So those discussions are really, really important because it could delay progression by 1 year.
So this is me, now my turn. Now I'm going to tell you a very quick story just to back up what Linda said, because I 100% agree with her. 4 years ago, maybe, I met a young gentleman. He was actually introduced to me by a school owner in Lagos, and mum and son came to see me. Son was, I think, 27 years of age. One of 7 children. He was the youngest. Father was a lawyer. Father had insisted that this is taking Linda's comments to an extreme. Father had insisted that every single child had studied law. This guy was the youngest. Very wealthy family. Every single one of them had gone abroad to do A-levels or foundation in the UK and then gone on to university. The guy that I was meeting was the youngest in the family. He'd gone off to the UK at 16. He flunked his A-levels. He clearly wasn't so strong academically. Then they tried to put him into a foundation college. Then I think he eventually got through the foundation college and he went into year 1 of a low-ranking British university. Struggled and struggled and struggled. And at 26, 27, he was sat in front of me in a room in Lagos. And mum said to me, so Mr. Morgan, can you please try and help my son? He's told me he doesn't want to be a lawyer, but we don't know what to do about it. And so I just said to the son, I said, no, what do you really, really want to do? And he just looked at me in a way very bravely, although I guess this has been going on for some years. He said, Richard, I want to be a fashion designer. Now you can imagine how Dad thought of that. Dad wasn't very keen on that idea, but I hadn't met the father at that point. And Mum's eyes, she rolled her eyes as she said it. She literally looked up to heaven and said, oh my God, what's going on here? We talked about it and we talked about it. And The sad thing about this is he now is a fashion designer. We got him there, but he was 26 when he saw me. He had to go literally back to square one to do it. He went back to the UK. He had to do a foundation program. The father agreed to it, I think because he'd been through quite a few years of torment, but also because in the foundation program there were some elements of the foundation program which had business in. So it wasn't just fashion design, it was fashion business and fashion law. So he kind of had a proper foundation preparation for going into that area of work. Anyway, motto of the story is he's now as happy as ever. He's eventually got there, but you could argue he's wasted 10 years of his life. So that's my little story on that. Let's get back to what I'm supposed to do here, which is talk about age. So Nigerians can enter tertiary education at, well, effectively, we can do it at different ages, but it can start at 16, because at 16 you can finish your WIAC and go straight into a Nigerian university program. You don't have secondary education after that necessarily. That is changing slightly, I would say, in Nigeria currently. So as a 16-year-old, you can go into university education in Nigeria. You can also go directly into university education in certain countries. I mean, low-ranking Canadian universities will take you at 16, and also some US universities as well. For some people, it might be the right thing to do. The US and Canada are 4-year university programs, whereas the UK is 3, which is why you can do it in the US and Canada, but not in the UK. It saves money, potentially, because you don't have to do 2 years of studying for a further school qualification like IB or A levels. That can be short-sightedness, but again, it depends on many things. It depends on what the child wants to study. It depends on what their end goal is. It depends on the country. Many different pluses and minuses. I know at the moment, with things as they are in Nigeria, that there is a tendency sometimes amongst parents to look for the shortest pathway to get their children through education and out into the real world. And I absolutely get that and understand it, and sometimes needs must, and that's how it has to be. But I mean, the way I see our job is to show them or explain to them the disadvantages of those routes, and just explain to them that if they can just be a little patient, they can afford a further year or two for their children's education, the end result may well be that it'll push them further up the ladder and give them a much better start ultimately in life. So that's what I'd say about the 16-year-old, 16+ route. It exists, but it's not for everybody. If you're a year older and you're 17, and here we have, I mean, most people that do IGCSEs will finish at 16. Some of the WIAC schools finish at 17. It's much more natural to do a foundation at 17. You're a year older. UK universities start, or at least the typical UK student studying at a UK school will enter university at 18 after A levels. And if you're a 17-year-old in Nigeria and you do a 1-year foundation route, you're going to enter school at exactly the same year group as your UK equivalent. I would say, Linda knows this better than me, that has got to be, if it's possible, the right thing to do. Even a year or two when you're a young girl from Nigeria who maybe has not been exposed as much as perhaps she could have been. Maybe it's better to be with your age mates and not go in directly into a university environment where all of a sudden you're going to find yourself studying alongside people who may be 10 years older than you. I mean, Linda also mentioned this need for getting used to the culture that you're moving into. If you're moving out of a setting in Nigeria, whatever country it might be, and you're moving into the US or Canada or the UK, things are different. I mean, cultures are different. It takes time to get used to them and time to get ready to take that extra step and go into them. And a foundation pathway is a good way of doing that. You're in an environment which is usually a school or college environment. You're with children your own age. They're usually from all over the world. So it's very international. You make some great friends during that year, I mean, potentially friends for life. And having done that route and got into the vibe of whichever country it might be, you then take the next step and it prepares you for university. And that's why it's called a pathway. It's a pathway because it's a route into university, and it's very definitely usually a route that is as much about preparation for life as it is about preparation for future studies. Lastly, you can go in as 18. It's becoming increasingly popular amongst certainly Nigerian students to stay in Nigeria for a little bit longer. And the reason for that, frankly, is the Nigerian economy. Times have changed, and whereas, I mean, you can see Dele's graphs, I mean, many years ago, people could afford to send their children into the UK very early. Now it's becoming much more difficult. People are keeping their children in Nigeria for longer. And although it's not what I do, I mean, there are children who are staying on in Nigeria and doing A-levels at very good colleges. I mean, that is an option. It is available. It's, again, not right for everybody, in my opinion, but for certain people, it makes sense. Those people will do A-levels or IB in the country, and then they'll go straight into year one of a university. And that's not a bad route. It's a good route for some. We work with all of the universities, and we're able to help and assist that when you do go that route, that you still make the right decision and you pick the right university for you. But all of those are options for your children, depending on your particular circumstances and their particular skill set. Back to Linda, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to build on what Richard's saying there, because there's some aspects of these movement through pathways, these transitions from pre-18 study into post-18 study. And that is that when you are working with your children, and it is a real job to work with students and understand where they're going, you also have to realize that entry is on exam results, yes, which is their potential. It's on their subject skills, yes, and choosing the right subject. It's on their aptitude, not just to the academic level, but their aptitude and their attitude to life. It's about their learning and their social skills. All of these things affect how they move from school in Nigeria to any other place outside of Nigeria where they're going to be learning, even inside Nigerian universities. There are some key things that are going to be quite important. You may have your child in a British education school, and you've got IGCSE English. And you're thinking, okay, Nigeria is an English-speaking country. We've got IGCSE English. They're going to pass that with a top grade, anywhere from 5 to 9, grades 5 to 9. They're going to go straight into the course. No, they're not. There is a requirement that they have to do an IELTS exam, and they have to get a certain grade from the IELTS exams. And different universities have different rules, different colleges have different rules, and they will have different grades in which they want people to get at IELTS. And it's an international agreed level of academic English. So inside IELTS exams, there are a series of reading skills, writing skills, listening skills, and speaking skills that are tested. And you're given a score. And for most universities around the world, a 6.5 score average is what is needed to secure a place in an English-speaking course. However, some countries have slightly different grades. For example, United Arab Emirates, actually it's only 4.5. Canada, there are certain vocational colleges where it's 4.5. So while 6.5 is generally the standard, it changes from place to place. Many European countries, France, Germany, Holland, and Spain, have universities that are English-speaking courses. And surprisingly, in those courses, you have to have a 7 average. It's actually higher than the UK. So the IELTS exam is one thing that parents sometimes are unaware of in their need to actually have completed as well. You've also got the IELTS need post A-level as well. And again, If you've done an English A level or an IBDP higher English level, then you find that sometimes there's some leeway in the IELTS score. But IELTS is an important exam, and it is an exam which requires funding because most schools do not provide this. So there are specialist organisations in Nigeria that provide that tutoring, and that will cost. So it's another cost in which you are investing in. You may also find that despite the fact you've got A levels, despite the fact you've got IB diploma, despite the fact you've got good grades, the university says, well, actually, you've got to sit our entrance exam. And normally there's a small fee that some of them charge, not particularly too much, and often it comes off of the fees of the university, but there may be an extra entrance exam. And again, every single university has a different style of entrance exam. So your Oxbridge, Harvard and Yale colleges will particularly be looking at critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills are not normally inside schools. They're covered, but they're not covered. So that might be something else where you may think, well, okay, how do I skill my child up to do this? How can I get the best result from this? The gold standard for university entrance, though, is still the IB diploma and A levels. And it's the A2 level, the second year of the A level that counts, not the first one, the AS level. The AS level informs the A2, but it is not the result. You have to complete the 2 years of study. For UK universities in particular, it is compulsory that they have English and Maths up to IGCSE level, and they have to have a grade 6 and above. If they don't, what can happen is you can be offered a place, but then they put you into an extra year in order to get your Maths and your English skills up to the level of the university course you're going to start. So those are some things you need to think about as well. When you are choosing A levels, when you are choosing the subjects inside the IB diploma, you have to think about what subjects you're going to study. In A levels, you normally pick 4, and then you drop 1 after 1 year if the stress of covering all 4 is rather large. And then you will have 3 A levels, which will then be graded, and those grades taken forward into your university application. With IB is a very broad range of subjects. You have to study 6 subjects. You have to do independent assessment activities in 3 subjects. You have to do an extended essay. You have to do a TOC evaluation, theory of knowledge evaluation. When you choose your 6 subjects, 3 of them have to be at higher level. The other 3 can be at standard level. So those are really important things to think about. So if you are going for a medical degree, you're going to have 2 sciences from the IB. And those sciences are going to have to be at the higher level. Your 3rd higher level can be any other subject, but you've got to have 2 higher level subjects at the IB. So all of that has to be planned through. All of that has to be prepared for. If you're coming from the WIAC system and the West African Secondary School Certificate, then as Richard said, you've got to do a foundation course first, which is normally about 1 year. But not all universities will guarantee process into the degree unless you perform very well in the foundation year. Finally, on this slide, academic counselling through the schools, academic counselling through organisations such as Morgan Oxford actually help you navigate all of this thinking. It helps you plan out a better action plan in which you can move your child through all these different hurdles just to get them into the university course. Where there is financial costs, they will be able to give you a much better idea of what is needed in terms of that pathway forward. We've already touched on this bit already when Richard was talking, but there are some things that might be worth also considering. If you're choosing A-level subjects, that pre-university stage, if you're choosing A-level subjects, you've picked your 4 subjects out, you've dropped one after 1 year, and your subjects are, for example, economics, accounting, and history. Some universities look at that and say you've only done 2 A-levels because the economics and the accountancy syllabuses, their specifications overlap too much. So they only count it as 1. And that's something to consider when you're doing your choices. So if you want to do economics and you want to do business studies, fine for A2, but when you come to that second year, sorry, AS, when you come to the second year, the A2, you need to have a discussion with your universities before you start that second year, because they might not accept both. Law, A-level, is not needed for a law degree. In fact, history and English are the ones that they're particularly interested in. If you want to do medicine and you're choosing India, English is more important than 3 sciences. They want 2 sciences and English. So there are these discussions when you're thinking about what pathway to take, to consider how you choose your subjects. That planning is key. The other thing is when you're thinking about your university education, your tertiary education, you get the brochures. Most of the brochures are online now. When you look at the brochure, what most people think about universities are bachelor's degrees, postgraduate diplomas, master's degrees. Today, you will get level 4 diplomas, level 5 diplomas, you'll get vocational qualifications, you get BTECs, you get honours degrees, you get ordinary bachelor's degrees. The world is much wider in terms of its qualification base. And depending on your learning style, depending on your maturity, different courses may be better suited to you, and the different pathways may be better suited. So for example, if you're more of a vocational learner, more a person who needs to do things whilst you're learning, maybe a degree at a university where it is lecture-based is not the one for you. So I'm very much someone who has to do something. When I learn, I have to do it. If I'm listening, I switch off. So I know the kind of learning that I can do and what I need to progress. The pathways through to careers are no longer one pathway. And in certain countries, Germany is really big for vocational. Spain, which is where I am currently, is very, very big for vocational. The UK is looking at building up its apprenticeship base, supported by university study. All these different pathways are equally as valid for a career as going straight into a bachelor's degree and following the traditional route. So there's more than one pathway to consider. And that means there's a lot more thinking and a lot more planning. It also changes the investment, the amount of money you're putting into it in order to complete those courses. So those are all quite key. And then when you're doing the academic counselling, whether it's somebody at school, whether it's just you and your child, whether it's with an agency or a company, for example, Morgan Oxford, the big questions of what, when, where, why, who, and how are key. And you have to keep going over them and over them and over them. And then when you think you've got there, and when you've got your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C, you must then think, what if? What if it doesn't work out? What do I do then? How can I get myself to where I want to be? And it is a constant cycle. It's constant thinking, constant talking, and sometimes the plan has to be rewritten. Back to you, Richard, I think. No, it's me again. this has already been touched on. It's not just about the course. It's not just about the exam results. It's about the pastoral care that's offered. Does it suit the child? Does a university have just completely independent learning with no other backup to support it? Are there lectures? Is there then seminars supported by mentoring sessions? What is available from the university? Is there a student counselling department within the university that is easily accessible? Does your child have learning needs or support needs in which the school can it actually support you? Most universities have departments which very, very effectively work with kids with dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, some psychological conditions that people can have, stress-related, anxiety, right the way through to psychosis can be supported by universities. And the idea is that everybody has the ability and the capacity to and potential to be able to achieve. Everybody has equal access. The diversity of learning styles, the diversity of needs of individuals can be successfully supported, and every person can have access to a good, productive life and career. And all of that must be considered during your decision making. Accommodation, are they going to live with family? Are they going to live in halls? Are they going to have a guardian linked to a shared house, maybe with a group of friends? How are they going to live? What are they going to live? What about the money to maintain them? A lot of universities actually state there is a financial maintenance that they want you to say you can secure before they accept your student. There's a university in the UK at the moment where there's a group of Nigerian students who are having problems maintaining their finances because of the economic situation, because of the exchange rates. And so the university has actually begun to help support the feeding of the students and some of the social care of the students because the economy has changed. And it's worthwhile asking questions of universities. What happens if? What happens if I get sick? What happens if the economy drops even further? What happens if my child has an accident? All of those things need to be questioned. Is there support from the university? That will affect their pastoral care, that will affect their mental health and well-being, that will help them with their happiness and their success. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, I was going to add a couple of things actually on what Linda was talking. A little bit of advice to parents of 16-year-olds. Beware the one-year A-level. Really beware the one-year A-level. It's something that gets offered in Nigeria quite regularly, where schools and colleges try to make the one-year A-level an alternative to a foundation program, and they sell it because it's only 1 year and then somebody can go off to university. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience that A-levels were the hardest 2 years of my life, and I went on and did a law degree afterwards, but I mean, at the end of the 2 years I really had to work very, 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 very hard to get in all the knowledge into my brain to then be able to sit the exams and do as well as I want. Honestly, if somebody can do that in 1 year, they've got to be pretty blooming bright, is all I would say. And what I think I'm trying to say is, if you push them and you try to get somebody to do too much too soon, it'll backfire, because they won't get the good A-level results that they would have got over 2 years. And if they don't get the good A-level results that they could have got had they had an extra year, they will end up either not being able to get into university at all, or they'll get into a lower ranking university. So in a way, it will be a false economy. Something to bear in mind. So it's very, very common in Nigeria at the moment. The other thing I was just going to say is that, before we go on to budget and scholarships, was the other side of this, let's call it the master's side of it. I mean, there are a lot of routes that are common. I mean, Linda touched on it. There's something called a top-up degree. You know, it's possible for certain people from certain backgrounds with certain vocational qualifications to be accepted, particularly into the UK. The UK is very strong at this. You can go off to certain universities. So if you do IT qualifications in Nigeria for a certain number of years, you effectively can bypass the first 2 years of university, and you just go for 1 year and you get your undergraduate degree, and you're still entitled to your 2 years post-study visa afterwards. So you get all the benefits of having been for 3 years, but you only pay for 1. Now, admittedly, you've lost the opportunity to be in the UK for 3 years, but you're there and you've got your British degree and you're able to stay afterwards for 2 years, and you're on the pathway potentially to permanent residence, as long as in those 2 years you can sort yourself out. I mean, another example of the same thing, MBAs. There are some interesting, fascinating MBAs, executive MBA programs going on where you're able to work and do your MBA. You can either do it online, or some of them will involve going off for 1 month at a stint every 12 months. So you do it online, and then for 1 month every year you go off to whichever university it might be. And these campuses are all over the world. Some of them are not so far away from Nigeria, where British universities have got campuses where you can get a British executive MBA and you fly in to whatever country it is, you do your 1 month, you come back and you work in your bank or your wherever it might be in Lagos, and you can combine the two. And that's also something that is very available. Not to mention, of course, our online learning as well, which is growing and growing and growing. Anyway, budgets and scholarships. Planning is so very, very important. I was smiling when Linda was talking, actually, because she's quite right to say you should be planning 3 years ahead. I was thinking about the 2 Nigerian parents who rang me up yesterday and who desperately want their children to be somewhere in September. So that happens a lot as well. And we can definitely respond to that, and we do. But, and there's a big but, you know, if you come to us in June telling us that you want to be in a university or in a school in September, your options are way less than if you come to us 2 years in advance. I mean, some doors will be entirely closed. If you want to go to Oxford University, or you want to go to some of the top schools and colleges, you've got to apply 2 or 3 years in advance. I mean, there are schools in the UK for younger children where actually you've got to apply before the child is born. And this is where, you know, Dele comes in with financial planning. I can tell you that when my own 2 children went to school, they've now grown up, unfortunately, my ex-wife, we're very good friends still, she was a very well organized person. We took out endowment policies almost the day they were born, and we invested in those endowment policies for 15 years, and at a certain time they matured, and we used the money from those endowments to pay for their education. And so the benefits of planning are really important, and for small sums every month you can see great benefits 15 or 20 years later. It's very important. If you're going to university in the UK, you've got to think about accommodation. Really important. If you're going to London, it's twice as much as if you're going to Newcastle, because it's a bit like being in Nigeria. Victoria Island in Lagos or Ikoyi in Lagos is a lot more expensive than, not that I've been to Warri or Kaduna, I guess. So you have to choose your city. Often it's better not to go to a capital city, but actually to go somewhere else, because the cost of living, the cost of accommodation will be an awful lot cheaper. The main thing is to plan. And I mean, Linda touched on the side of a British university which is helping people who are struggling in the UK. I have to say there's another side. There's something that I read last week about another university where actually the students are in trouble because the university have made a deliberate decision that they are actually going to deal with students that can't afford fees. And so people have come into the university and been studying for a master's degree, and one particular university has basically decided that they're going to terminate studies because people have not budgeted properly. You've also got to be realistic about things. I mean, under the rules for studying at university, you can work 20 hours a week during term time. and during holidays you can work 40 hours a week. The irony of this is that the most expensive cities tend to be where the best employment opportunities are. So London, it's probably easier to get a job than it is in Inverness. Inverness will be significantly cheaper as a place to live. So very difficult to get everything. Having said that, I would say from my experience that people who want to find a way, find a way. I mean, one of the beauties to my mind about Nigerians as a group is you are incredibly resilient and incredibly strong. I mean, I've seen many instances of people who, on the face of it, have struggled and haven't come from particularly wealthy backgrounds, but they do always get work because they go out there and they look for it. So a lot of it is down to the individual as well. But the importance of planning financially cannot be overemphasized, and don't be taken in by stories. Make sure you get your facts right before you travel, because the grass isn't always greener on the other side, I guess, is the honest truth, although hopefully it is usually. Scholarship opportunities, they exist. They are different in different markets. The US is very good for undergraduate scholarships. The UK is rubbish for undergraduate scholarships, but it's much stronger for masters and PhD scholarships. There are two types of scholarships in my experience. Those are those for academic excellence, or for, should I say, excellence generally. It could be academic excellence, it could be sporting excellence. And then there are those that are means-based, which are, I suppose they are a form of scholarship, but needs-based scholarships exist in the US. We've been lucky enough to send a few students to the US on 100% fully funded scholarships. Usually the students in question, I have to say, even if they're needs-based, are also brilliant. So I mean, they're going to take the academically very strong one. We do have access to sports-based scholarships. I know that Nigerians love soccer, as do I. I'm a passionate football fan. I'm not going to tell you who I support because it might mean that some of you won't deal with me, so I'll keep that to myself. But we've got access to soccer academies in the UK, where we've been able to place children onto good scholarships, but also where you have an instance where you want to give your child the chance to potentially make it as a footballer. And I have to say, as somebody that's played a lot of football, the chances of them making it are virtually zero. You need to know that, but there's always a possibility that they might be the exception to the rule. And where, I mean, I've come across quite a few parents who want to give their child the chance, but also they want to make sure they get a good education at the same time. So they've got the backup. It's almost as though they're allowing the child to get it out of their system. If it works, the child becomes the next Bukayo Saka. Well, that's fantastic. If it doesn't work, at least they've got good qualifications and they can go on to lead a good life in whichever area it is they decide to go on to. That's very important. But we've got access to all of those opportunities. We've also got, and actually we haven't said this anywhere in any of this webinar, and I think it's worth saying, summer schools. Summer schools are a great opportunity to dip your toe into the water. They're not so expensive. This is where your child goes abroad for 2 weeks over the summer. We've got some amazing summer school experiences. It can be sport orientated, it can be music orientated, it can be activity orientated. We do work with several schools in Nigeria where we take groups from schools abroad, and I have to say the feedback that we've received from them has generally been very, very positive. I mean, often some of the parents go, the children generally love it, I have to say, and it enables them to dip their toe in the water in the way that Linda was talking about, transitioning and getting used to experience abroad. It's a good way of seeing how life is in another country, and if you are trying to decide whether or not it's Canada or it's the USA or it's the UK, going to one of those countries for 2 weeks over the summer is a good way of actually giving your child an experience of life in that country. And they might love it or they may not, but it perhaps will help them to be involved in the decision-making process. Life after scholarships is well, qualifying factors. There are lots of potential qualifying factors because these scholarships come in so many different shapes and sizes. I mean, there are scholarships just for females. There are scholarships just for Muslim females. There are scholarships for people who want to do particular subjects. We have good knowledge of them, and usually we can assist with introductions or helping by getting admissions to people who sometimes need admission offers in order to be able to put scholarship applications in. So it is something we can help with, but it's not going to be available to everyone. I mean, that's the harsh reality, unfortunately. And also, there are certain subjects where you will never get a scholarship. It'd be very unusual to get a scholarship for medicine, for example. I don't know if the logic is that the chances are that if you go through 6 years of medicine, you're going to earn lots of money at the end of it, but for whatever reason, it's almost impossible to get a medical scholarship. Of course, the other type of scholarship is the scholarships which emanate from within Nigeria. Those are different. I mean, I'm not really talking about those today, but they also exist, and they're different. I mean, you can, of course, get either government bodies or private companies that will have scholarships available. Yeah, we've been involved with those on 1 or 2 occasions, so that's a different route in. And also, obviously, if that opportunity comes up, is very worthy of looking at taking. Life after scholarships. Well, the only thing I'd say about scholarships is I've got 1 or 2 slightly bad experiences of them, in the sense that if you go and do scholarship from 16 to 18, but there's no provision for what you do afterwards, that can cause problems for sure. And of course, somebody goes away, gets a fantastic opportunity from 16 to 18, and then at 18, possibly because the institution they're at is at fault and haven't really dealt properly with where they go afterwards, there can be an issue, because at that point you've exposed somebody to a different life, and to a life where a lot of other people around them have come from perhaps backgrounds where they have more money, and all of a sudden those people are able to go on because their parents are privately funding the next bit of their education, but they cannot. And that's a big concern, and that needs to be properly managed. I mean, I would say the primary responsibility for that is with the school, where the people have just come through. However, Linda is probably smiling. We've certainly been involved in that ourselves on at least 1 occasion, where we did have somebody who went abroad, did brilliantly, and then at the end of it all, having done brilliantly, couldn't go on to a UK undergraduate, because despite the fact she was absolutely amazing as a student, the undergraduate scholarships in the UK are very hard to come by. I'll tell you about that story in a minute, because that's got a nice ending, but it did involve Linda and I in some effort. It's never too young to start planning. Well, it isn't, and that's why I said the story of myself, and I think literally, maybe we were exceptional. I think almost when my children were born, we took out investment plans and we started to put money away, and 15 years later we had some money to help with our children's education, and it's certainly a good thing to do, because yeah, you can never plan too early. Next slide. Yeah. The other important thing in all of this is one of the services that we provide is visa expertise. Countries are very, very different in terms of what they require for visas. Usually there are conditions around money, conditions around bank accounts, conditions around which bank accounts are you can use for visa applications. If you've got somebody who's under the age of 18, can you use your parents' account? Can you use a relative's account? Can you have a sponsor who you're not related to? Can you use the bank account of a company that maybe your parents own? Different countries, different rules. Isn't one rule for everybody, and it's very easy to be caught out. Sometimes the advice to people is to pay the entire tuition fee up front before you put the visa application in, because it shows quite clearly that you are a serious person, that you're going to study, and your chances of getting the visa are substantially increased if you pay the whole of the sum. That's easier in certain countries than others. And if the fees for your study are only, let's say, £6,000, I mean, the advice will always be to pay it up front. There are one or two countries that are difficult. I mentioned Ireland. Ireland is a country, for example, where I would say generally you pay the entire tuition fee up front to give yourself the best chance of getting a visa. Beyond the visa, the right to work and the right to stay. Well, I've already touched on the fact that in the UK, you can work 20 hours a week as a student and 40 hours during vacation. That's really important, because some of the most important, most expensive countries to live in actually can be some of the easiest countries to live in. I mean, the UK is an example. You don't generally pay your university fees up front. You pay them instrumentally, maybe over 3 payments to 5 payments. There are some universities where you pay 5 payments. You'll pay an initial deposit, you'll put your visa application in. When you arrive at university, you'll pay your first instalment, and there'll be other ones during the course of the year. If you are able to get employment while you're studying and then during your holidays, you can help towards paying some of those fees during the year. You go to a different country, which might be substantially cheaper, which on the face of it makes a lot more sense, but you'll have to pay the whole of your fees up front, and you won't be able to get a job because there's no obvious jobs for students to take. So things like that are really important to weigh up when you're deciding what is best for you. The right to stay is really interesting, I mean, fascinating. Yeah, again, different countries, different rules, and they change an awful lot. I mean, January the 1st of this year, the UK announced that dependents could no longer travel with their student partners or husbands or wives to the UK. That massively changed the UK market overnight. However, there are actually some exceptions to that rule. If you do a research master's or a PhD, you can still take your dependent with you. So there are actually some specific courses where dependents can still go to the UK. Canada, in theory, still takes dependents, although time will tell as to actually how many of those visas come out. The rules in Canada have just changed recently, and the number of institutions that can take international students has substantially declined because of recent changes. An interesting one for you that I didn't know until relatively recently: if you go to school and finish your schooling in the Netherlands, you immediately, from the point where you start at school in the Netherlands, you acquire a period of residence which goes towards your permanent residence. So if you start at 16 and you finish your schooling, say your IB at 18, and then you go into a Dutch university, I hope I'm right in saying this because I'm not entirely sure I am, but I think I am. After 3 years, i.e. when you're 19, you are entitled to Dutch permanent residence. I thought that was really interesting, actually, because that's EEC country, Schengen. These nuances are really important and could well make a big difference to your choice. And obviously, if we're advising you, we make sure that you have all this information to you before you make your decisions. Yeah, what else? I think, it says here, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're under 18, very important that whatever you do with your parents' consent. At the end of the day, you're still a minor, and they're probably footing the bill as well. So that's very important. Every country has different procedures. Every country has different qualifying criteria. And again, our job is to be on hand to help you go through that minefield and ultimately make the right choices for you. Right, yeah, 2 people at the end. Okay, well, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but this is Favour. She's currently in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Institute of Science and Technology, where she's studying for a 4-year engineering program. She was an exceptional student, I mean, a truly exceptional student. Linda actually had worked with her very closely and knows her better than me. But no, she was lucky enough to get a 2-year A-level scholarship to the UK. And she flew. I mean, she got 4 A stars at A-level. She as I was saying earlier, an interesting example of somebody who absolutely flew 4 A stars at A level, but we could not get her onto an undergraduate course. She came back to Nigeria for a year. She didn't sit on her backside. In the time she was back, when she had time off, she did a 5th A level and got an A star. And we were able to get her, I think, by the end of it, 5 fully funded offers of scholarships from either the USA or Hong Kong. And she chose to go to Hong Kong, where she is at the moment. We're still in touch with her. She's a wonderful student and is doing very, very well. And it would be lovely to be able to do that for all our students. But I have to say, she is a very gifted student. Got another one, I think, who's, well, maybe Adereo, not a dissimilar pathway. Adereo ended up in the USA, but she also went to the UK on a fully funded scholarship, and then to the US on a fully funded scholarship. And that might be a good place to finish. It is possible to do to actually experience the world through your education. I mean, that it's not unusual to come to the UK and do the first part of your education and then go to the US to finish off either a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, or IB and then an undergraduate program. This is what Adereo did. She started off in the UK, she ended up in the US, and I guess has had the benefit of experiencing both countries, and I'm sure that will hold her in good stead for life in general. We have helped lots of people like these two at all sorts of different levels. Personally, I get a great deal of pleasure out of it. It's not something that we necessarily earn much money, if any money, for, but it does give me an awful lot of personal satisfaction to know that you've actually helped somebody like either of these two really get on in life, and at the end of the day become high flyers and hopefully give back, which is really, really important. I think I've probably finished. I'm going to hand it back to Dele now.
Okay. Well, look, Richard and Linda, thank you both for sharing enormous insights. We've spent quite a lot of time, probably too much time, going into a great deal of detail, but it's a very encompassing topic. It's clear in what we've heard from you both today that there's no one size fits all in terms of when it comes to providing the best education choices for your children, particularly sending them abroad. So we've heard today about the importance of pastoral care. Every child is different, some depending on the level of maturity, sometimes depending on gender. They need maybe additional support, additional hands. We've heard that there are other costs that one has to think about. Sometimes it's not just a course, there's foundation years or additional qualifications, the IL exams. So sometimes there's lots of other information and other requirements that you have to begin to take into consideration to make the right decisions. Is the decision really being led by the parent or by the child, and are you taking account of everybody's personal requirements and preferences and skills? There are numerous pathways. Linda and Richard have highlighted that. There are numerous pathways, and you have to think about a plan B sometimes. If the first version that you're trying to achieve doesn't work out, are there other ways to still get things done? So clear to me, what I hope we've all taken away from this is that you must plan in advance. Sending your children overseas for education is an enormous investment in them and their future, but it requires time, consideration, and well-considered planning. Richard, Linda, Morgan Oxford Education are very, very well placed to assist you with that. They both have enormous experience dealing with Nigerian clients and being based here in Nigeria itself. So they should be a first port of call for helping you begin to consider these things and make these decisions. Richard touched on something that is, frankly, I would say to you, is the biggest obstacle for sending children abroad, ends up being funding. Richard, in his own case, started saving as soon as his children were born and saved for 15 years to be in a position to send his children to the schools I'm sure they have attended. And that actually is the reality. We've seen examples of brilliant students who've gone abroad, they've had scholarships for a period of time, but that then couldn't sustain them onto the final stages of their higher education. So planning in terms of a call for action for everybody today, that planning both in terms of which schools, why, understand your children's strengths and weaknesses and how to adapt to make this dream possible. But financially, if you don't make considered steps to make planning and put those things in place, it doesn't happen. Or it means that you end up having to pick which of your 3 kids you can afford to send. You know, and those are not pleasant conversations. So we get to have wonderful conversations with our clients and understand their dreams and their ambitions. Sending their kids abroad to school is often featured prominently there, but sometimes we have to have very difficult conversations because the parents haven't put the right planning in place. So I'd implore you that that's something that has to be done. Funding ends up being the biggest barrier to entry ultimately. So given we spent quite a lot of time, the numerous questions have come in. We've had a wonderful turnout today. I'm sure we've not been able to address everything, but what we will certainly do is follow up with each and everybody who's attended and who's registered individually in the coming days and weeks, and sit down with you and you know, explore further what your needs and your requirements are. But it's left to say just to thank my my guests, Richard and Linda today, to thank my audience. We'll certainly be having more sessions like this. There's so many topics to cover. We can look specifically what it looks like for the US versus the UK, what the outcomes are. We've looked at tertiary education. We can also look at, you know, education, secondary schools, boarding schools. There are numerous topics that we do need to cover, and we'll do those as a series. You know, Carrick, we also will help clients thinking about potentially buying real estate in overseas markets. So in-person seminars, online webinars, all of those things to follow. But we thank you today for making time for us on Democracy Day. Enjoy the rest of your, you know, your holiday period, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.